My brilliant legal panel is back with me right now. We have former federal prosecutors Gene Rossi and Alyse Adamson, and also Benjamin Chu, who served as co-lead counsel for Johnny Depp in his defamation trial against Amber Heard. I mean, let's just start for a second at we've all been in a trial in front of a jury. And although this person has a pseudonym and we don't have eyes and ears in the courtroom through the actual lens, the weight of testimony that emotional is going to take a toll, not just the reporters, but the jurors themselves. I mean, to think about them hearing this and the weight it's taken on her, what impact does that have if you're the prosecution?
Yeah, Laura, I mean, I can't imagine how this might have resonated with the jury. As we just heard from the reporting, this witness was crying. She was shrinking. Jurors assess witnesses' credibility. And that seemed, from all accounts, to be very credible. I think the impact on the prosecution's case is it's going to be helpful because witnesses need to be believed for the prosecution to prove their case. And I think this is probably one of the strongest witnesses that have come out for the prosecution thus far. And it is very sad that she had to be re-traumatized to get this testimony out, but it was necessary to be able to hold Combs accountable. That's the way the prosecution sees it and why they sponsored this testimony.
They certainly want that debt to be connected for the jury, and they want to be able to pull on the figurative heartstrings and say, you corroborate Cassie, look what he's done, violence, sexual assault and allegations, but they have a RICO case. And the RICO case is notoriously difficult to connect dots, particularly because jurors assume there'll be standalone charges. Okay, if he did these things, then why am I not seeing the rape, the arson, the sexual assault, the gun, the drugs? You got to piece that together. So tell me, Ben, in your estimation, does her testimony move the needle, as emotional as it was, towards the RICO case?
Well, I don't think directly, but I do think, I totally agree. I think it was so impactful on the jury, and it underscores, you know, all the other testimony that heard from Cassidy. I think on the RICO case, I think Capricorn Clark's testimony yesterday went a long way toward that because you had a kidnapping, which is another predicate act.
The allegation being that he came to her house and removed her against her will to go with him to Kid Cudi's house so that they could essentially confront him for dating Cassie. That's the predicate crime that she is alleging on that point. You know, but this idea of the pattern, RICO requires the pattern of conduct as well. So one predicate crime, another predicate crime. When you're hearing the violence aspects of it, is that the crux of the prosecution's case? These are not necessarily related, but you've got all these sprinkles of predicate crimes.
I think Mia was probably almost as important as Cassie.
Really?
Yes. Cassie was what I call the prologue witness. You know, the beginning of a great book, you have a witness that sort of summarizes everything. The beauty of Mia is she corroborates a ton of what Cassie said. But that little report you just did, to me, connects a dot to the enterprise. How? He's using the HR department as his playground. And she was asked on direct, why didn't you report it to HR? Because he controls it. So you are now connecting his threat, his coercion, and his fraud to his own business through the HR department. And the more I think about it, he did control the HR because none of these testifying women have even thought about going to HR because he probably had a flunky or flunkies in HR that were under his thumb and would do anything he wanted, including firing an employee. That connects him to the enterprise.
That's an interesting point. We have heard about people in the inner circle that have been the recipients of reports and they have said, I will then talk to him. But the idea of that enterprise is part of the elements. I mean, you can't just look at this in isolation. You have to connect the dots if you're the prosecution. And actually, we heard from Mia, she was one of the first, I think that's the first time we've heard someone in this trial who suggested that she could not give consent to Diddy. And I want to point out why. Because she testified about an alleged sexual assault where he gave her 2 shots that she said hit her pretty hard. Then she says Combs approached her unwanted and, quote, my next memory is I just remember being on a chair, like the main room in the penthouse, and coming to the chair and the sun was coming up. It suggests that she wasn't able to remember the series of events. That's important. Control, the coercion is not just psychological, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there was a lot of that. I think even the reporter also said, she said that she couldn't say no to a sandwich. She also testified that if she tried to leave, he would send security out to find her. She was not free to leave. She was not there on her own free will. And with respect to the RICO charge, I have to say, her testimony supports 2 other predicate offenses. Potential forced labor, I mean, that sexual assault doesn't go to forced labor, but being forced to work 24 hours a day in a mansion that you're not free to leave sure does. Also, distribution of narcotics. She testified he forced her to try ketamine. I mean, horrific. That is not how a regular business operates. That is establishing a corrupt enterprise.
And we should point out that a business can have legitimate business operations and still engage in illegitimate and criminal actions and create that prosecutorial crime here we're talking about. And also, I would point out, she's an employee, not a girlfriend. So the idea of this being a romantic, jealous person that you plan for Cassie, very different. But let's just talk about the idea here that she couldn't go to police. She didn't go to police. How will the cross, as defense counsel, try to undermine this? Because the words free will keep coming to my mind. I'm thinking about how would I anticipate the defense working this? Is that the angle, that her choices is the issue?
Yeah, I think they'll try that, but I think this is a very dangerous witness for them to push. I think to go after such a vulnerable witness who's obviously made such a strong impression, I think is very dangerous.
So what should they do?
Oh, on cross?
Yeah.
First off, you pray, get out the rosary. and I'm serious. If I were the defense attorneys, I would want to crawl under the table. And the thing that I used to do in my big trials, not all my trials are big, but I would always assign somebody, watch the jury. When a witness is on a stand, I want to see what the jury's doing. Are they crying? Are they getting emotional? I wanted to hear more about the jury's reaction. That reporters were crying, that's a pretty good sign that her testimony was powerful. But to get to the cross, on a serious note, all I would try to do is focus politely and professionally. If you go after her hard, a destructive cross versus constructive, you're going to lose a case tomorrow. So I would just try to get into, she had an opportunity to go to the police. She had an opportunity to leave him, although the threat was real. She was enamored with his glamour. She had a job, a well-paying job, a steady job. I would just focus on that rather than going after her with any inconsistencies.
So you'd focus on the idea of that, similar to how they did for Cassie, a mixed motive for staying, as opposed to just one. Well, you seem really concerned about her being somebody optically you could go after in a destructive cross. What would you focus on?
I agree with Jean. I would go after, just the fact that she did have options, and I would be somewhat gentle with her, because I think the prospect of it blowing up in their faces is huge.
It could also highlight how important a witness she is the more you go after, because they didn't even cross some other people. Alyse, finally, the defense is knowing that the prosecution has alerted them of some changes in their case, and that this could make the case go longer than the promised July 4th. Many people wondered, will this really go to that level? What could those changes be?
Honestly, I was wondering the same thing. I'm like, they say they're going to call fewer witnesses, and now you're saying your case is going to take longer. I mean, it's possible that they're going to call more witnesses to rebut what they've heard, right? Or there's something that they've heard and they want to introduce more evidence, right? Do you agree? I mean,
absolutely. What I think, I'm just thinking out loud here as a defense attorney. They're probably going to call 1 or 2 experts, guaranteed. Yeah. They're going to throw experts, because when you put experts on the stand, they can hurt your case, but you're calling an expert on a certain topic, and they don't really have as much baggage as anybody else. So I predict they're probably adding 1 or 2 experts to get beyond July 4th.
You would do that?
Yeah, somebody to rebut Don Hughes.
Exactly.
Maybe someone a little more active and a little more likable, maybe.
I think it signals that the prosecution's doing a good job, quite frankly.
Or they're doing what they did not expect them to do. Remember, there's a witness who's not going to testify now, so maybe they have to change their just defense strategy overall. Fascinating conversation. Thank you. Stand by. You're all coming back.